Okay, so we are in Acts chapter 27, and what we are looking at now is the tail end of this book, and what you're going to see is Paul beginning to make his journey there. Although, what happens is that a lot of times God will tell you you're going to go do something, or you're going somewhere, or something. He's going to allow you to accomplish something. And while you're on your way to do what God told you he was going to have you to do, all of a sudden something comes up and it looks like it's going to stop you. But that's one of the things that we have to always try to keep in mind, that in the midst of earthly catastrophes and disasters and issues and problems, nothing stops what God says is to happen. And it's hard for us to understand that sometimes, because we're looking at what we can see. And unfortunately, because we're human beings and we live our everyday life from the time we were a child even up to now, based upon our five senses. This is what we've learned to trust. So what we got to then be able to understand is that there is a sense in that we have to trust more than our five senses, and that is our sense on our relationship with the Spirit of God, with the Lord. And it's just difficult to do, and we will never perfect it. We will never get to the point where we got it, overwhelmingly using it successfully. We'll have pockets and periods where we're able to do it, but we will never perfect that until we end up in glory. But we do need to be aware of it and try, put forth a good effort, fight a good fight, put a good, concerted effort. Thank you. That's another phrase I was looking for, but that it's slipped my mind. A lot of other things. But we got to put forth some work. It's basically what I'm trying to say, to do the things that God has asked us to do. Now, the work doesn't make us saved. We do the work because we are saved. All right. And so what we see here is Paul. He's going to go about doing what God told him to do. He said, "You will go before Caesar." Well, now he's on his way. He's getting into the ship to go towards the journey to get him to where he's going to meet Caesar. And then we see what happens here. All right, and we'll talk about it. And I'm sure we can apply a lot of this to our lives when we look at some of the disasters that happens on our way. And all that is to get you discouraged from what you know God has told you. So let's take a quick listen. Acts chapter 27.
Chapter 27. And when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus' band. And entering into a ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning to sail by the coast of Asia, one Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, being with us. And the next day we touched at Sidon. Julius courteously entreated Paul, and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself. And when we had launched from thence, we sailed unto Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us therein. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were come over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete, over against Salmone. And hardly passing it came unto a place which is called the Fair Havens, nigh whereunto was the city of Lasea. Now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them, and said unto them,
Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the lading and ship, but also of our lives.
Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phoenice, and there to winter, which is an haven of Crete, and lieth toward the southwest and northwest. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, loosing thence they sailed close by Crete. But not long after there arose against it a tempestuous wind called Euroclydon. And when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. And running under a certain island which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat, which when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, strake sail, and so were driven. And we being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. And the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. But after long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said,
Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am, and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, that it shall be even as it was told me. Howbeit we must be cast upon a certain island.
But when the 14th night was come, as we were driven up and down in Adria about midnight, the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country, and sounded and found it 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they sounded again and found it 15 fathoms. Then, fearing lest we should have fallen upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern, and wished for the day. And as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea, under color as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers,
Except these abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved.
Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat, and let her fall off. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying,
This day is the 14th day that ye have tarried, and continue fasting, having taken nothing. Wherefore I pray you to take some meat, for this is for your health, for there shall not an hair fall from the head of any of you.
And when he had thus spoken, he took bread and gave thanks to God in presence of them all, and when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then were they all of good cheer, and they also took some meat. And we were in all, in the ship, 260 souls. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, and cast out the wheat into the sea. And when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into the which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust in the ship. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves unto the sea, and loosed the rudder bands, and hoisted up the mainsail to the wind, and made toward shore. And falling into a place where 2 seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the fore part stuck fast, and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. And the soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim out and escape. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land, and the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land.
All right. Now, what we see there is a story about a sailing voyage. And we see a situation that if you are a sailor, if you have sailing experience, if you know how to work a boat, a lot of this verbiage and communications is very familiar to you. You know what's going on. You can actually picture it. And me not being a sailor, a lot of times I have to go and check it out. We'll see, what does this mean? What does that mean? Why would you do this? Why would you do that? And all that. And so in preparing for this, I have done it. But one of the things that I found, and I want to actually allow you to listen to as well, is I thought was a very good modern translation. This translation is very well known today. It's called The Message. But I think in their description of this chapter, they bring more modern language to it. So I'm going to play that one too, so you can get an idea. Just like we went through it with the King James, but he's going to use more modern language. But take a listen to this. This is the same chapter, chapter 26, from The Message. And then we're going to talk. Chapter 27, thank you. From The Message.
A storm at sea. Chapter 27. As soon as arrangements were complete for our sailing to Italy, Paul and a few other prisoners were placed under the supervision of a centurion named Julius, a member of an elite guard. We boarded a ship from Adramyttium that was bound for Ephesus and ports west. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, went with us. The next day we put in at Sidon. Julius treated Paul most decently, let him get off the ship and enjoy the hospitality of his friends there. Out to sea again, we sailed north under the protection of the northeast shore of Cyprus, because winds out of the west were against us, and then along the coast westward to the port of Myra. There, the centurion found an Egyptian ship headed for Italy and transferred us on board. We ran into bad weather and found it impossible to stay on course. After much difficulty, we finally made it to the southern coast of the island of Crete and docked at Good Harbor, appropriate name. By this time, we had lost a lot of time. We had passed the autumn equinox, so it would be stormy weather from now on through the winter, too dangerous for sailing. Paul warned, "I see only disaster ahead for cargo and ship, to say nothing of our lives, if we put out to sea now." But it was not the best harbor for staying the winter. Phoenix, a few miles further on, was more suitable. The centurion set Paul's warning aside and let the ship captain and the ship owner talk him into trying for the next harbor. When a gentle southerly breeze came up, they weighed anchor, thinking it would be smooth sailing. But they were no sooner out to sea than a gale-force wind, the infamous nor'easter, struck. They lost all control of the ship. It was a cork in the storm. We came under the lee of the small island named Clauda and managed to get a lifeboat ready and reef the sails. But rocky shoals prevented us from getting close. We only managed to avoid them by throwing out drift anchors. Next day, out on the high seas again and badly damaged now by the storm, we dumped the cargo overboard. The third day, the sailors lightened the ship further by throwing off all the tackle and provisions. It had been many days since we had seen either sun or stars. Wind and waves were battering us unmercifully, and we lost all hope of rescue. With our appetite for both food and life long gone, Paul took his place in our midst and said, "Friends, you really should have listened to me back in Crete. We could have avoided all this trouble and trial. But there's no need to dwell on that now. From now on, things are looking up. I can assure you that there'll not be a single drowning among us, although I can't say as much for the ship. The ship itself is doomed." Last night God's angel stood at my side, an angel of this God I serve, saying to me, "Don't give up, Paul. You're going to stand before Caesar yet, and everyone sailing with you is also going to make it. So, dear friends, take heart. I believe God will do exactly what he told me. But we're going to shipwreck on some island or other." On the 14th night, adrift somewhere on the Adriatic Sea, at about midnight the sailors sensed that we were approaching land. Sounding, they measured a depth of 120 feet, and shortly after that, 90 feet. Afraid that we were about to run aground, they threw out 4 anchors and prayed for daylight. Some of the sailors tried to jump ship. They let down the lifeboat, pretending they were going to set out more anchors from the bow. Paul saw through their guise and told the centurion and his soldiers, "If these sailors don't stay with the ship, we're all going down." So the soldiers cut the lines to the lifeboat and let it drift off. With dawn about to break, Paul called everyone together and proposed breakfast. "This is the 14th day we've gone without food. None of us has felt like eating. But I urge you to eat something now. You'll need strength for the rescue ahead. You're going to come out of this without even a scratch." He broke the bread, gave thanks to God, passed it around, and they all ate heartily. 276 of us, all told. With the meal finished and everyone full, the ship was further lightened by dumping the grain overboard. At daybreak, no one recognized the land, but then they did notice a bay with a nice beach. They decided to try to run the ship up on the beach. They cut the anchors, loosed the tiller, raised the sail, and ran before the wind toward the beach. But we didn't make it. Still far from shore, we hit a reef and the ship began to break up. The soldiers decided to kill the prisoners so none could escape by swimming, but the centurion, determined to save Paul, stopped them. He gave orders for anyone who could swim to dive in and go for it, and for the rest to grab a plank. Everyone made it to shore safely.
All right. So that gives you another, audio vision of what you can imagine is going on at this particular time. And really what this is, from a natural standpoint, I mean, I think there's a couple of things we should keep in mind. Paul's on this ship, and he's on his way to do something that God told him he was going to do. And there was a bunch of bad decisions made. What you find is the situation of trying to accomplish something, based upon what you personally feel I want to do, because I don't like this. Now, this is what you'll see here. Let's take a look at this. Let's go back in here. We're gonna find. It starts off by telling us in the very beginning that that they were on their way and they were going over to Italy, all right, because they're going to go see Caesar, all right. Now, Julius, who was the centurion, he was a centurion of the Augustan band, and remember, who was Augustan? Caesar. He was Caesar, all right. So he's in charge of making sure Paul gets to where he wants to get to. Now, it seems as though somehow or another, Paul and Julius hit it off well, and I think that you could almost say that Paul probably has converted Julius. Julius, in verse 3, it says, "And the next day when they touched down in Sidon, Julius gave Paul liberty so that he could go and see his friends and refresh himself." All right. So he had an enormous trust for Paul, and I think he also had a bit of admiration for him as well. And I do believe that Paul and Julius talked about the Lord, and I wouldn't doubt very much that Julius was a believer. All right, but then it says, "And they launched from this and sailed unto Cyprus," all right, because the winds were contrary. All right, so right off the bat, trying to do something else, trying to do one thing, but something else is kind of pushing you in another direction. So you almost got to go with the flow. All right, and this is important to keep in mind. Paul is about to do what God told him to do. And so he's thinking he's on his way there, but then you go this way, got to go this way. It's like driving in the Bronx. You ever drive in the Bronx and you see the building you're trying to get to, but you can't get to it because of all the one-way streets? Mm-hmm. He's like, oh, that's the building. Let me turn right. Oh, can't turn that way. The building's right there. You can almost take a rock and hit it. But you can't get to it because it's a one-way street. So you got to drive all the way around. Oh, can't go down that way. There's a park. Road ends. There's a dead-end street here. Well, how do I get around to where that building is? And sometimes you got to... Bronx is a difficult place sometimes to navigate when you get into certain sections. Well, it's like that with life sometimes. You see and you know where you're trying to get to. And you go down, and oh, can't go that way. That's a one-way street. Can't go this way. That's a dead end. Can't go here. Yeah. And so what you find is stuff that just working contrary. All right. They said because they had the winds were contrary. Life is like that. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to achieve the goal. You're just under contrary winds. All right? And it says, and they sailed, and they went over to Cyprus and over to Pamphylia, and then they came to Myra and to Lycia. And it says, and there the centurion found a ship of Alexander sailing towards Italy, and he put us therein. So now, he found another ship, and he says, okay, now this ship is heading towards Alexander. This is the direction that we're trying to go. And it's important that we keep everybody together. So everybody, let's get off of this ship, and we're now going on to this ship. And whether they had other people on there or not that were part of their band, the bottom line is they're now on their way. Because their goal is to get to Italy. All right? So now I found another means. I was going on one ship, found another ship going that way. Now I'm going on that ship. And sometimes you say, okay, well, I'm trying this. That didn't work. I'm dropping that philosophy. I'm going to jump on this philosophy. I'm going to try this one. All right, this one might work because it's going in the direction that I want to go. And a lot of times that's our personal thinking. All right. Well, in reality, it doesn't matter which ship you were on. It didn't matter. All right, because you were going to probably go through the difficulties, but the point is, you're still going to get to where God tells you, and that's one of the things that when you know God has spoken to you, and sometimes you got to hold on to these little gems. Sometimes the Lord will say something to you in your heart. Sometimes you'll wake up and you feel something. You'll have a loved one tell you something, that doesn't know what you're dealing with, but speaks right to your point. Different things like that. We easily forget those things. And those are the things we need to take and mount on the wall, record, put somewhere so you can go back and remember, God told me this. Because if he told you that, I guarantee you, in a lot of situations, you're going to find out that it looks like you're not going where he told you. But is God a liar? Absolutely not. So you're going where God told you you're going. Whether the path or the direction that you're going was one that you desired to go or not, that's irrelevant. God knows why you need to go this route. And so you're going that route. And so for whatever reason, Paul is going this route. All right, so hop ship, go to another ship. Verse 7, it says, and when they had sailed slowly many days, let's see, trying to get to where you're trying to get to, but how are you getting there? Slowly. All right? So if you ain't got patience, then guess what?
You're going to learn it quick.
That's it. They sailed slowly a few days? No. Many days. So many days of just, and they scarcely came over against Cretus. All right, so they barely made it there, and the winds did not suffer us when we sailed to Crete over against Salome. All right, another word I can mispronounce, but either way, that town too. All right, and then verse 8 it says we hardly passed it. So I mean, look what he's talking about. It's like we probably could have swam faster than this ship is going. You see what he's trying to say? We are not moving. It is taking a long time. You ever have something that you know God is wants you to accomplish or to do, and it is just taking a long time? I thought this would be over with by now. I didn't think this was going to last this long. I didn't think I was going to go through this way. I didn't think I was going to go to this town or to this situation or to this job or to this situation or to this town. Why am I going all around the world to get to where? This is a lot of times how it is. Is it like that every time? No. But it's like that with here. And so we take lessons from this. We learn from this. You know, we draw from this. So when I see that my life or when I see that my particular situation or issue that I'm dealing with is matching this, I can then go, oh, okay, all right. Okay. Let me just buckle down. It's going to be a rough ride, but I know I'll get there. Why? Because God said so. But it looks like I'm going to be doing one of these, sailing voyages like Paul to get to my point where God has told me I would get to. Well, and so when you see things patterning, matching, being similar to things that you see in Scripture, take it and utilize it. All right? Is patterning a word?
Patterning. You forgot the end. That's all.
You say forming a pattern.
Oh boy, why God had me teach this Bible? I don't know. I guess.
We know what you're trying to say.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Patterning.
You got it.
I like the way that kind of stumbled out my mouth. It sure didn't come out with words. All right.
So Shakespeare made up words.
Shakespeare made up words?
Instead of Dr. Seuss.
Oh, okay. Well, we know Dr. Seuss made up words, so maybe I should start talking like him. All right, so in verse 9, we see, and now when much time was spent. What? Oh, come on. Much what? Are they trying to get you to understand that this is going what? Slowly. It is not happening quickly. You thought you were just going to get on the ship and get to your destination? It's not happening. The Holy Spirit is re-emphasizing time and time and time again. This is a slow procedure here. This journey is taking a while. And Paul, all right? All right, so, and now when much time was spent and when sailing was now what? Dangerous. Because the fast was, when I say the fast was now already spent, that's one of the festivals had already happened. And so now we're entering into the autumn. All right, the fall equinox had already passed. Now when they saw that, then Paul began to recognize, and he said, you know what? I'm seeing the pattern here. Everything is going slow. Everything is taking its time. You know what? Paul makes this statement from his own. Paul admonished them and said unto them, Sirs, I perceive, now this is his perception, that this voyage will be of hurt and of much damage, not only to the lading and to the ship, but also to our lives. So what Paul is saying, you know what? Let's stop fighting and trying to hurry up, God. I think God is trying to tell us to just stand still. And Paul is trying to admonish them, why don't we just stay here for the winter? Let's not try to rush and get to a place where we really can't get to right now. Let's just stay here, harbor here, do it. We'll spend the winter here. It's just a period of time. We'll get to our journey. We just won't get there this season. So we'll spend the whole winter here. We'll work here. We'll do what we got to do here. It'll be fine. We'll be okay. All right. And then when the weather breaks in the spring, we'll then make our journey. And Paul is saying, why should we fight what God is trying to do? Why don't we just do this? All right. So, and he's making good sense, right? Verse 11, nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. So they're saying, we're not waiting. All right. Now, why did they do that? Look at verse 12. And because the haven was not conducive to winter in. So they didn't want to winter there because it wasn't what they wanted. See? Here now is the issue. Because I know what I want, and this is not it. I'm not staying here. Sometimes when God is trying to tell you, I'm going to get you where you need to be, but I need you to do this for a time. All right? Take care of this. Stay here. Only for a what? A season. Just a winter. Spring comes, then you're going to get to your destination. And they're like, no, because this is not the best. This is not the best place. This is not where we want to be. We didn't get on this ship to go here. We got on this ship to get to Italy. Because we're trying to get to see Caesar. And now we got to stay here at this place. And this ain't the best place to stay for the winter. But Paul is saying, I think we should stay. And they're saying, we're not staying. And so they listen to these seasoned sailors, so to speak. All right. And it says, and the more part advised to depart thence also. And everybody was agreeing. I don't want to stay. You want to stay here for the winter? No. You want to stay? I don't want to stay here. All right. But Paul said we should stay. I don't care what Paul said. I don't want to stay here for the whole winter. And so what? And if by any means they may attain to Phoenice, all right. So they want to get to this place called Phoenice. And it says, and there they want to winter. Wow, that's a better place. If we're going to have to wait, we'll wait there. That's a better place to wait. So they make a decision based upon this is what I want to do and not what God is trying to advise through circumstances and situations. He speaks to us. God speaks to us in so many different ways. Our problem is, are we ready and willing to listen? Or are we fighting against the forces? All right. So then, what happens in verse, finishing up verse 12, it says, and they went towards the south and towards the northwest, verse 13, and then when a south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, they loosed thence and sailed close by Crete. Now, they had a south wind. All right? South wind means they're getting a little bit more what? Warmer weather. It's kind of like, oh, this is good. Because now, because it's fall is coming. They're in fall, and winter is coming. And so when they get a south wind, oh, this is good weather. Let's go ahead and sail now. See? And now you think, okay, now this must be a sign from the Lord that it's time to sail. Some people might say. But wait a minute. What about all the other situations of taking a long time? Things are not going good. We're trying to sail. We're barely making it. We can almost swim faster than we're sailing. You ignored all that. One day of good hot weather. Oh, I'm going now. You see how when we think that the circumstances fit what we want, oh, that must be God. When the circumstances don't fit what we want, sometimes we can ignore it. But that is when the Lord is speaking. And Paul told them. And that's also when you get that confirmation. Paul told them. And he didn't say God told me. He just told them from his wisdom and from his knowledge. He said, I perceive that we should stay here and go to, and we can set sail again in the spring. Well, they get that little south wind, and now they're off and going. It says in 14, but no longer after they arose again a tempest called, I'm just going to call it a nor'easter. I'm not pronouncing that King James word. All right, but till now, we got this big storm that's come up now. And it says, and when the ship was caught, it could not bear up, and the wind, and they let it drive. They couldn't bear it up in the wind, so they had to basically say, we're not going to try to direct or steer. They had to pull down the sails and let the wind blow the ship wherever it wanted to go, so that they wouldn't lose all their sailing and all their stuff. And then from this point on, we just look at this story and look at the mess, look at the issues. All right? Yep.
Can you go back and, if you can, explain the difference between why at the beginning all the negative signs that they were receiving was from God, and how this south wind blowing is not of God? Because to me, this is complicated, because it's interpreting signs. When you have Paul saying something, but if he's saying it from his own perception, it's not God's voice, then that's up to interpretation too.
Well, it is. It's all interpretation, but that's why.
So, how do you do right interpretation so that you don't end up in the tempest and the shipwreck, or was that where they were supposed to end up anyway?
Well, if they would have stayed in the city and wintered there that they didn't want to stay in, they wouldn't have had to deal with the shipwreck. But I think the best way, and to answer your question is, I can't give you clear-cut answers. That's why everybody has to know God for yourself. And you have to know how God is speaking to you. But what we can do from narrating this particular story is that we can see time and time and time again, there's a consistency, a repetitiveness of, we're trying to get here, we're on one ship, had to get off of that ship to get on another ship. That ship then started going slow. Wow, looks like we're not really going there, going where we want to go. And then now the fall equinox hits when you know you are not supposed to sail. That's common knowledge. And that's when I did some of my studying, because I'm not a sailor. But that's one of the things that I found from the commentators, that once they knew as professional seamen that you don't sail on that particular land, that particular area, after the equinox, once the winter is on, because that's when all the problems. Like in our area, we know that hurricane season is about to come up, right? You know, all up the East Coast, all around, where the Haiti and Jamaica and all of Florida, all of that. That's hurricane season. So you know that, it's about that time. So if you want to go on a cruise ship now, you can go, but you know that you run the risk, right? And so they knew this. And they're seeing, and this is just, it's not mystical in the sense that you want to be able to say, ooh, do I hear the voice of God? It's just following what God gives us as far as common sense, and and doing the things that are basic and natural to do. Well, if we weren't going so slow, we would have been able to get where we had to get to before the fall equinox. But because things kept going slow, bogging down, many days, things taking so long, sailed many days, very slow, boom, boom. We get to a certain place, and at least we're safe. We're in a dock. It ain't the best dock, but now here comes the spring equinox. The fall equinox. Now, this is not sailing time. So you got all those things that add up. but then you get something that's unusual for a short period of time, a south wind, and now all the other information that you gathered, you toss it aside for one little small ray of hope, and then you jump on that without any true direction. Because when you go against, and I think this is something that just popped in my mind, I think this will be good. When you go against very clear common sense, everyday basics, without God telling you directly, confirming it through revelation, then you're fighting against the very essence of what God has set up. For instance, a very simple thing is there's no reason, even though you read about Jesus walking on water, for you to go down on the Hudson River, get off a boat and think you're going to walk, unless you get very specific, audible or internal or some kind of perception that God is telling you, today you will walk on water. Because it's not what? It's not natural, is it? It's supernatural. But we do know Jesus did that, didn't he? Yes. But that don't mean that I'm going to do it. And I don't suggest that you do it. It's just basic. Now, that's an extreme point to make. Well, when you have the situation where our whole circumstances has brought us to this point where we're now here and we're safe, and we're going to have to winter somewhere, and that's another point too. They were not going to get to Italy from wherever they sailed from. They were going to get to another port that they liked better. So you still weren't going to your destination. You were going to something that you wanted to get to winter in more favorable than where you already are. So when you use all these basic just clues, and for me, that's all it really is. I can't give hard and fast rules. Well, this plus this plus this always equals this. That's why we study the scripture. That's why we pray. That's why we stay around the things of the Lord, so we can get a familiarity to what is of God and what is not. His word is so important to us to help us to find patterns in life that mirrors the things that we're dealing with, and we can recognize that as a fingerprint or blueprint of God. The more you are entangled into the things of God, the more his voice and his doings are familiar to you. I still don't think that no one can ever know without a doubt, unless God chooses to come and talk to you like Paul, like God talked to Paul, where he knocked him off that beast. When you have a situation like that, well then you don't got to think or worry about whether that was the Lord. Because when Paul said, "Who are you, Lord?" he says, "I am Jesus, whom you crucified, who you persecuted rather." Mm-hmm. And so when you have a situation like that, but most of us have to go by what God has told us to go by. God has told us to study this word. God has told us to seek him. God has told, and he said, and then when you do that, I will then reveal myself to you. All of this is through revelation. You can't learn God through intellect, and nor can you put God into a pattern that you can say, this is the way to follow. Go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. No, you can't put God in a pattern like that. That's why you have to build a continuous relationship with him and be listening and praying and asking him. And it's a continuous development every day. It's new. There's nothing that's the same. And you just got to continue. And nobody can give you a formula that will make your decision making easy. Your decision making is going to be based on your relationship with the Lord. I can't give anybody, well, here's the formula. This is how you should make your decisions for your life. I can't do that. But I can tell you, if you get into his word and get to know who God is and love the Lord and seek him and pray and ask him, he will give you ways based on your own personality and your own ability to perceive and to understand. He will talk to you through that. He talks your language. All right? And I think that's important to keep in mind when we're seeking God for direction. All right? Does that help?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. So now what we see here, and we go through this here and we'll see. In 17, it says, which when they had taken up, they used helps to undergird the ship. All right, so now they're trying to help the ship because the ship is in this storm. All right, verse 18, it says, and when we, being exceedingly tossed with a what? With a tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. So they're throwing stuff over. So now they're losing cargo. Stuff that you had, stuff that would have made it, stuff that you would not have to throw away or disregard because of this decision. Now you got to get rid of it. You have to, because you got to save life, trying to save the ship. You got to get rid of some non-essential stuff. Now you're losing valuable stuff. See? Because you're in this. Right? And then in 19, it says, on the third day, we cast with our own hands the tackling of the ship. The things that would have made the ship, even, stuff that you put on the ship to help sailing. Because you can't sail now because you're just being tossed. You got to throw it out. All right? And then in 20, it says, and when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared. That means they had nothing but cloudy days. And no small tempest lay on us. In other words, there was a big storm. All hope that we should be saved was taken away. Now you're at a point where you believe, where you're like, I don't even think we're going to make it. I'm never going to get there. It's never going to happen. All right? And that's okay too, because, the thing to keep in mind, that this is in here to let us know that your life might end up something like this. But doesn't mean that you don't, that, number one, God doesn't love you, nor that God doesn't care for you. He does care for you. Because what these people did, they made a what? A mistake. Right? And everybody's going to make mistakes. But when you make mistakes, some mistakes cost you more than others. And so this mistake costing them all the cargo they had on the ship, the majority of it, they basically little by little stripping the ship of its valuable tools and things that are useful for sailing. And now they believe that all hope is lost. All right. But after a long absence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, sirs, you should have what? Don't you? The I told you so's. Sirs, you should have hearkened unto me and not loosed from Crete, and have not gained this what? Harm and what? Loss. Okay? So a lot of things we had to just get rid of. You would not have had the loss. We would have been in a town we didn't want to be in, but who wants to be where we are right now? We would prefer to be back in that town we didn't want to went in. That old bad, vagabond hotel. I don't want to stay here in this little vagabond place, this little rinky-dinky town, or this little hoopty-doopty job, or this little, whoopty-doopty type of situation. Like all my little phrases, I know. I'm like Dr. Seuss now. I feel like I make up words. So, but now there's harm and there's loss. All right, 22. And now I exhort you. Be of what? Good cheer. Start smiling. Be happy. Now, when you're going through your problem and you got issues and somebody tells you, just be happy. Just be joyful. Be of good cheer. All right? Let me tell you something. You want to smack them. No, but you can't, because they're telling you the truth. Though you do not want to hear it. But what helps you? Okay, let me tell you what helps me sometimes. You know what helps me? Is history. Helps me a lot. Just knowing history, studying history, helps me a lot. The Bible has a lot of history in it, reading some of this, but then it also helps you understand about how things were back in the days, how things were in time. And I tell you, just a couple days ago, I was taking a shower and I put the hot water on, and I was feeling the hot water. I was like, wow, this is just great. And I said, and just thinking about the history, when people had to go down to the rivers and walk and lug the water, they couldn't just stand under some hot water and just let the hot water just soothe them. They couldn't do that.
Yeah.
They didn't have that. They didn't have that indoor plumbing. I'm saying, Lord, I just thank you. I thank you because I said there are people in the world today, plus there were people back in history. They didn't have this.
So they don't have it today.
They don't have it to this day. And I said, well, I thank you. And then there's some people that got plumbing, and the plumbing don't work. It's broke, and they don't have the money to fix it.
That's right.
I thank God that the plumbing I have works.
It works. That's right.
I tell you, I mean, when I flush the toilet, I just thank God.
That's right.
You know, I ain't got to haul this stuff outside and throw it somewhere. It, it just takes care of businesses. Take care of little stuff like that, because I understand I'm not taking lightly what God has blessed us with. And I think this is the problem, and why I can't understand why so many people in America that have so many blessings are ungrateful and take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And we get so just like flippant that this is how it's supposed to be.
Right.
It is not how it's supposed to be. It is how it is, and we need to thank God that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because it has not always been like that, and for some places it still is not like this.
That's right.
You can go down to the supermarket. I'm hungry. I'm going down to the supermarket and buy me a cow already chopped up, already done. You ain't got to go and slit the cow's throat, gut them, skin them.
Okay, we get the picture.
So that I don't have to keep going on.
No.
All right. You want some bacon? You go down and get you some. All right. Same scenario. We really forget, and I thank God that God has allowed me to recognize, and I think we all should recognize, we are blessed beyond measure.
Mm-hmm.
We live in if you look at it compared to the whole world history and the world today, we're living like kings.
Oh yeah.
We're living like princes.
But we don't think so.
We don't think that.
'Cause
We don't believe it. Because we think that there's other people that got better stuff than I got. And I want to make sure that I get all that stuff that they got. I want all that too. All right? And the more stuff they create, I want that too. All right? And so we got to have all this stuff, and we got to have all these things and all this. And we forget. You know? I mean, we don't remember how, because when I went down to my stepfather's house, they didn't have all these separate rooms. Grandma and Grandpa had this corner. Excuse me. Excuse me. And the kids slept over in this corner. And over here was where they kept the water, so you couldn't sleep over there. And everybody had a corner. That's just how it was. But we forget. We forget, and we ignore how God blesses us. That's why, if you don't understand your history, you're doomed to repeat, and you're gonna have to learn these lessons all over again. Learn the lessons from those who passed. The Bible says these things were written of old time for our admiration and for our example. So we need to pay attention to that and recognize, hey, I thank God I don't have to go through some of the things that these people had to go through. And so, yes, be of good cheer. While you're going through your circumstance, remember, you are blessed beyond measure, no matter what issues you may be going through a lot of times. And does that mean that we should always compare ourselves to other people and say, well, I got more than these, so I should feel blessed? I'm not saying that, but what I'm trying to get you to do is to recognize where God has already brought you, what He's already done for you, what He's already provided for you. All right? And then, you look at, and then, I mean, you could bring this down to even the fact of, look at some people that can't even feed themselves. Right? You got some people they got a lot of material stuff, but they can't walk, they can't talk. Have ailments and diseases, or some people even born that way. So many ways that if we really want to think about it, we could recognize how blessed we are. But what we choose to do is look at what we don't have and feel depressed. When we should look at what we do have and be of good cheer, like Paul says here. Right? That's what we should be doing. So Paul says, be of good cheer, for there shall no loss to any man's life among you, but the ship. So he's saying, now be of good cheer. The ship is going to be destroyed. But he's still telling you to what? Feel blessed. All right? Be blessed. He says, for there stood this night by me the angel of God, of whom I am, and who I serve, saying, fear not. Now the angel told Paul to do what?
Fear not.
All right. So all Paul is doing is just repeating. The angel told me, don't have any fear. And so I'm telling y'all, don't have any fear. Be of good cheer. He said, fear not, Paul. Thou must be brought before Caesar. God wants to talk to the king. Don't think that these presidents and these different people, that God is not going to make sure you're going to hear me. You're going to hear what I got to say. Now, what you do with it, it's up to you. Now, we know when Paul finally gets to go see Nero, what does Nero do in response? He kills Paul. Right. But Jesus said, when I sent my prophets, when he told the parable, some of them they tormented, and some of them they killed. Okay. And so the angel of God said, Paul, you're going before the king. You're going to go see Caesar. And lo, God hath given these all that sail with you. So then the angel told him, said, Paul, and everybody that's sailing with you, for your sake, I'm going to bless them, and they will not die. All right? Wherefore, sirs, be of what? Good cheer. For I believe what? God. There you go. See? Why are you of good cheer? Because I believe God. And when God tells me it's going to be all right, guess what's going to happen?
It's going to be all right.
There you go. All right, so 26 says, howbeit we must be cast upon some island. So he's saying, now, howbeit, I mean, you're going to get some bumps and bruises. But still be of what? Good cheer. Fear not. It says, but when the 14th night was come and we were driven, what night? How many nights? 14? Wow. So this wasn't no 2 or 3 day thing. A couple of weeks, several weeks. All right. And so now let's start this. Okay, let us stick. Since we're going to be saved, now they're trying to figure out stuff, which is fine. So they said, okay, let's see how deep it is before we hit rocks. And they first time they threw, it was 20 fathoms. And the next time they sounded and measured, it was 15. Okay, all right. Well, the rocks, we're getting closer to rocks. It says, and 29, it says, then feared lest we should have fallen upon rocks. But see, the thing about it is, it says, then feared. God told them to what? Fear not. But it's hard for us to do that. It's difficult. So them fearing that they may fall upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out. Now they're getting rid of the anchors. And they threw them out of the stone and wished for day. I'll tell you, brother. See that you always can see them just, oh Lord, please, just sometimes you can really be a prayer warrior in difficult times. It says, and when the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down a boat into the sea under color, as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship. Now, what these guys were doing, they're saying, you know what? We're going to just get off this ship, and we're going to take one of these lifeboats. We're going to let it down. We're not going to let anybody see us. We're going to act like we're letting down. We're getting ready to cut an anchor, but really we're going to let down this boat, and we're going to jump in the boat. All right. 31. Paul said unto the centurion and to the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved. So when Paul recognized through his perception, remember now, God is dealing with Paul. And this whole thing, Paul's become the center focal point here. And God is dealing with it. And Paul has insight. Paul is watching and seeing stuff. He's like, wait a minute. And God is allowing his mind to work sharply on certain things. And God will give, wherever your gift is, God will have your mind work sharply in that particular area.
Yes, he will.
You will know and be able to pick up stuff. You don't have to it's not going to be a long study and a hard day's night of work to understand it. When God has you in a place where He wants you to be, the things that you need to be doing, they'll come to you like that. And so Paul is like, look, number one, I see y'all trying to escape a different way. I told you, God said, just stay here, we'll be fine. If you leave the ship, the contract is off. You will lose your life. So stay on the ship. It's the same thing with the Lord. No matter how rocky it gets, serving the Lord, you better not jump ship. You got to stay with the Lord, because that's the only way you can be saved. All right. Well, folks talk about me, they teasing me. No, you better stay with the Lord. It says, then the soldiers cast off the ropes of the boat and let her fall. So now they say, all right, well, let's let this boat go. I don't want to jump in there and die. It says, and while the days were coming up, Paul besought them that we all should take and eat. All right, saying it has been what? 14 days. There's another 14-day thing going on here. They've been on this boat. Is that the same 14 days or an additional 14 days?
I don't think it matters at this point.
Yeah, right.
It don't. When you've been in the fire for 14 days or 28 days, you've been what? You already well cooked. And so, yeah, they've been beat up by this storm. All right? And it says, and they tarried and continued to fast, having taken nothing. Wherefore I pray you to take some meat. Paul is saying, listen, guys, do some of the stuff. I know you're in a bad situation, but you need to do some of the stuff that's normal to do, like eat. Don't just go into a hole and fall out and just let your circumstances overwhelm you. Still do some of the stuff that you got to do, just basic, everyday, normal stuff that God tells us we need to be doing, because it's common sense. Like eating breakfast or having some food or you know, going out and doing what you got to do, taking a bath, you know, all those basic stuff, brushing your teeth, you know, all that stuff we should do. All right, don't get into it. So what he's saying, get out of your depression. I told you to be of what? Good cheer. Come on here and get some to eat. And it says, and so when they had in 35 it says, and when we had thus spoken, he took bread and gave what? Thanks. You see that? Lord, I thank you that at least we got bread. All right, and he got thanks to God, and all right, and then it says, and when they had all broken it, he began to eat. It says, and when they were all of good cheer. Oh, now they're all feeling good. You get your belly full, feel a little better. All right? And they also took some meat. No, okay, I got some bread. Let me pass me one of them burgers over there. All right. It says, and when all the ship 216 souls. All right, so that's 276 people. All right, 200, 3 score is 60. And then 16. So you add the 16 to the 60, that's 76. To the 200, 276 people. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship by casting out the rest of the wheat. They took all the wheat that they had, threw that into the sea. Okay? So still being a good cheer, but because you did have to launch and you didn't stay winter in that town you didn't want to stay into, you're still throwing away what? Cargo. Stuff that you really could have used. And when it was day, they knew not land. They still couldn't see land, but then they discovered a certain creek. They looked at something and said, oh, we see a little beachfront over there on the shore. And so they were minded then to try to, get there and to thrust the ship there if be all possible. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves unto the sea and loosed the rudder and the bands and the hoses up and all this salesman stuff, the people that do sailor stuff. Yeah, sailor stuff that they are doing to get that ship to move over towards where they wanted to go. And it says, in falling into a place where 2 seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the forepart stuck fast. So they didn't make it to the beach. They hit something else. And the remaining remained unmovable, but the hinder part of it broke. So now the ship done snapped. It's breaking apart. Right? The front part is stuck in these rocks. The back part was waving back and forth, and it finally just snaps. And the soldiers counseled to kill the prisoners. Now, didn't Paul say we all gonna be fine?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But the soldiers are worried. Well, look, I don't want these prisoners escaping and all this. Well, let's just kill the prisoners. It says, lest any of them should swim and escape. 43. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, because remember, at this particular time, Paul is a what? He's a prisoner. He wanted to save Paul and keep him for that purpose. He commanded that they that could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. So what they did do, they said, listen, if you can swim, go and swim the land. We're close enough to where you can swim. And the rest on some boards, on some broken pieces of the ship. All right, so you better grab something that floats and jump on in there and make your way to the land. And it says, and so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. All right, so they all got to the land. Wasn't where they were trying to go, wasn't where they should have been, but they're all aware they are now. And then now you got to take it from here. And so a lot of times that's how it is with life. Sometimes when you look back in your own personal history, you begin to realize this is not where I set sail for when I was 14 or 18 or 22 or 35 or 44. Should I continue?
No.
You got it.
We get it.
This is not where I was aiming for. This was not where I set my sails to go to. But guess what? That's where you are now. So now, gather yourself. All right? I still have to get to where God wants me to be. Because God wants all of us to be at a certain place. We are destined and designed to do certain things. And God wants us to be there. How we get there, God will provide. Whether we have all these ups and downs and rough waters and everything, a lot of times when we start going our own way, we add to the confusion of our lives. A lot of times our lives seem confused enough, but then we add to it. And then there's so many other things that we do. And the thing about it is, there's no foolproof plan to keep you from doing it. Because if it was, I certainly would be trying to use it. It's called just live and, you ever heard that phrase? Live and learn. Just live and learn. And you begin. But that's why you absorb yourself into the Word, get into it, look for things, look for patterns, pray, get into the Lord, speak with Him, talk with Him. It helps us to recognize and to hear those subtle winds of the Lord. Go to the right, stand still, 2 steps forward. You know what I'm saying? There's little stuff like that that you and the Lord will know because He will speak your language. I mean, we all have a national language, but you have a personal language that you and the Lord speak. And He knows how to get to you and to speak to you and to get you to understand. But you have to be willing to listen. Jesus often said, he that hath an ear to hear, let him hear. Now, why would He have to say that? If God's word and His voice and His will would just overwhelm us, where the majority of the time, it will not overwhelm us. We have to try to hear. We have to want to hear. And we have to seek the Lord, to sit at His feet, to hear. You know, if you seek, you shall find. And all that's part of our everyday walk. All right, we're going to stop there. We'll finish up with the final chapter in in the book of Acts. I don't know if it'll be next week or whenever. Because I know I got some tournaments and stuff to go to. But we'll finish up the next time we gather. That will be our final time in the book of Acts. Any comments?